This lesson is about the rules for writing the Hamza in Arabic. For some reason, some historical reason, Hamza did not end up as a regular letter of the Arabic alphabet. And so there are a number of ways to write it, and a relatively complicated set of rules to write it correctly. No matter how the Hamza is written, of course, it is still just a glottal stop. It can be written alone on the line, or it can be written on a seat. The seat can be an aleph, a ya without the two dots, called a nebra, or a waw. But it doesn't really matter what the seat is. The seat is ignored. The Hamza is still just a glottal stop. The rules for Hamza are divided into three parts. The rules for Hamza at the beginning of a word, in the middle of the word, and at the end of a word. At the beginning of the word, you always write the Hamza either on or under an aleph. And it doesn't really matter what the vowel is. If the vowel is an E, then you write it below the aleph, but if the vowel is an U or an A, you write it above the aleph. That is in the case of short vowels. In the case of long vowels, it's similar. If the long vowel is E, you still write the Hamza below the aleph. If the long vowel is U, you just simply put the Hamza above the aleph. And the exception, of course, is the madda. They don't like writing two alephs in a row, and so they made up the madda specifically to mean an aleph with a Hamza on top followed by a long aleph, a. So these are pronounced a, u, e, a, u, e. So this slide just gives examples of the same thing on the last slide, except in context. And so all of these are words that start with an aleph, and they have some vowel, either a, u, e, or a, u, e. So we have the word akbar, uqaddim, inara, ana, umin, iman. So you can see that the Hamza is written either above or below the aleph, or it changes to a medda, depending on what the vowel is, but because it's at the beginning of the word, it is always going to be on an aleph. In the middle of a word, there is a strength rule. The strength rule basically divides the three vowels of Arabic, e, u, a, into strong, medium, and weak. And so the e vowel, for Hamza purposes, is considered strong. The u vowel, for Hamza purposes, is medium, and the a vowel is weak. And so you just need to remember this order: e strong, u medium, a weak. How this works out in practice has to do with the following rules. The first is that if there is an e vowel, short or long, on either side of the Hamza, then the seat is going to be the aleph maksura, the ya without the two dots, and often called in this context a nebra, just a little jigger with a Hamza on top. If there is no e, no short or long e vowel, but there is an u vowel on either side of the Hamza, then the seat is going to be a waw. And so basically, if there's an e on either side, it's going to be a nebra. If there's no e, but there is an u on either side, it's going to be a waw. The last case is if there's no e and no u, but there is an a sound, either long or short, on either side of the Hamza. And in that case, the seat is an aleph. So you can see that the nebra is going to be the most common, because it wins any conflict. The waw is going to be the next most common, because when there's no e, it will win the conflict. And the only time you'll have an aleph in the middle of the word with a Hamza on it is when there's no e and no u, just an a on either one side, the other, or both sides. So here we can see those rules worked out in practice. So here we have a conflict. We have su'ila. We have an u sound on one side of the Hamza and an e sound on the other side. And so, because of the strength rule, the e wins, and the Hamza gets written on a nebra. Here we have the word su'al with an u sound on before the Hamza and an a sound after the Hamza, and again, because of the strength rule, the u sound wins, and the Hamza is written on a waw. Now notice that in the case of su'ila and in the case of su'al, the seat of the Hamza is not pronounced. but it is a hint of what the vowel is. What's pronounced is just the hamza and the vowels around it, su, I, la, and that seat is not pronounced. But because it is a nebra here, we know that there has to be a e vowel on one side, and because there's a dhamma here, we know that there is no e vowel, but there must be an u vowel on some side, so su'al. In the last case, we have an a hamza written on a aleph, and that is because the word is sa'ala. On both sides of the hamza, we have the a sound, and so we're permitted to write it on an aleph. Just other examples of the e, as'ila. Here we have a sukoon before, but we have an e after, and so it's written on a nebra. Here we have the word ru'ya, where we have a dhamma before and a sukoon after, but it's still, because of the dhamma before, written on the waw. And mas'ala, where again we have a sukoon before, but a fatha after, and so the hamza is written on an aleph. Now the exception to these middle of the word rules is similar to the exception at the beginning. Remember, the reason you have a medda at the beginning is because they don't want to write two aleph in a row. And it turns out that when you have a long aleph followed by a hamza, followed by an a sound, the regular rules say that you should put that hamza on the aleph, but that would create two alephs in a row. And so whenever you have an aleph followed by a hamza, followed by either a fatha or another aleph, you put the hamza on the line. And so here are several examples. You have tasa'ala, qira'a, wara'ahu, and ijra'at, showing different phonological environments where you have this a sound, and they don't want to have the two alephs in a row, and so they put the hamza on the line. However, if the vowel after is not a fatha, then you still use the rules, because that doesn't create that, because the other vowels are stronger. So we have the related word tasa'ul, masa'il, sa'iq, and many, many others where you have a long aleph, but then the vowel after the hamza is stronger and it creates the seat. The rules for hamza at the end of the word are a little different. The first rule is that if you have a long vowel followed by a hamza at the end, or if you have a consonant with sukoon followed by a hamza. In other words, if the thing that's right before the hamza is either a long vowel or a sukoon, and then the hamza comes at the end, you write it on the line without a seat. So we can see, for example, maji, which has the long vowel e, bina, which has the long vowel a, su, which has the long vowel u, and then many, many words like juz, where there's no vowel before the hamza, and so the hamza is written on the line. In all other cases, and all of the cases are specifically where there is a short vowel, not a long vowel, and not a sukoon, but a short vowel right before the hamza, and the hamza comes at the end, then you just use the strength rule, just like in the middle. And so, mufajit, preceded by a kasra, tanabbu, where the hamza is preceded by a dhamma, and nabat, where it is preceded by a fatha. And again, notice here that you're not pronouncing the seat. You're pronouncing jim, kasra, hamza, mufajit. You're pronouncing ba, dhamma, hamza, tanabbu. Okay, you're not pronouncing that oo that's below the thing. It's just a seat, and it's not pronounced. And nabat, same thing. You're pronouncing the ba, then the fatha, and then the hamza, and not the aleph that's underneath the hamza. Now, for hamzas at the end, the question might arise as to whether you use the grammar vowel to help you choose what the hamza is going to be, because words end in vowels, and those vowels change. And so, for instance, we have the word asdiqa, which means friends, and in context, that can be, say it's definite, al-asdiqa'u, al-asdiqa'a, and al-asdiqa'i. Well, it turns out that as long as the hamza is at the end of the word, the grammar vowel is ignored. So in the case of asdiqa, there's a long vowel before it, so you write it on the line, no matter whether you pronounce it asdiqa'u, al-asdiqa'a, or al-asdiqa'i. However, you need to remember that if you do add a pronoun ending to a word that ends in a hamza, well then the word no longer ends in a hamza. And once you have that pronoun in there, then the middle of the word rules apply. So you completely ignore the end of the word rules once you get a pronoun ending or something else that makes the hamza not at the end of the word anymore. And so that's why you'll see all this variation in the way words are written. For instance, the word astiqa, when it's written by itself, has the hamza on the line. However, when you add the pronoun ending hu onto the end of it, well then of course the grammar vowel is going to affect it, because those vowels are not at the end of the word anymore. Hu is at the end of the word. And so you have astiqa'uhu, meaning his friends in the nominative, astiqa'ahu, his friends in the accusative, and here the hamza is on the line because there's a long vowel, according to the middle of the long aleph with a hamza and a fatha. That's the middle of the word rules with the aleph. And astiqa'ihi, where it's on a nebra because of the e of the genitive. And so you write astiqa 4 different ways. One way when it has no pronoun ending and the hamza is at the end, and then 3 different ways when it does have a pronoun ending and the hamza is changing because the grammar vowels change from u to a to e. Now there's another little variation that you will notice, and this is a country variation. Just like the madda was created so that you wouldn't have 2 as in a row, I've given you the example of Qur'an, which could have been written Qur'an with a aleph, with a hamza on top and then an aleph, but they don't want the 2 alephs in a row, and so instead they write the madda. Well, it turns out that the Egyptian Language Academy passed a rule saying that they didn't want 2 wows in a row either. They were fine with 2 yas in a row, but they didn't want 2 alephs in a row, and they didn't want 2 wows in a row. And so when the rules would create 2 wows in a row, they changed it to a nebra. However, none of the other countries do this, and so you get these variations in spelling. In Jordan and other countries, it's spelled mas'ul, with the seat as a wow, and then followed by a wow, because there's a long vowel, mas'ul. However, Egyptians don't want to write those 2 wows in a row, and so they write the hamza on a nebra, mas'ul, and you'll see it both ways, depending on, which kind of a newspaper you're reading. Similar words, shu'un, matters or affairs. In Jordan, you'll often see it written with the hamza on a wow, whereas in Egypt, you will often see it written with a hamza on a nebra. And these countries influence each other, so it's not 100%. So you're going to see a little bit of variation in both Jordan and Egypt of people writing it one way or the other. Another source of variation with the way hamza is written has to do with verbs, the last, radical of which is a hamza. And so, for instance, we have the verbs qara'a, which ends in a hamza, and bada'a, to read and to begin. To be 100% correct, you simply apply the rules and go with it. And some people do that, and so you'll often see them written correctly with the rules applied. However, other people feel that basic graphic shape of the verb in its most basic form, the he past tense form, bada'a and qara'a, should be maintained whenever they can, because that makes them recognize the verb better. And so they write the hamza on the aleph even when the rules say it shouldn't go there. And this leads to variability that you can see illustrated in the next slide. So, for example, the verb form from qara'a, meaning to read, they read, is pronounced qara'u with a fatha before, an a before, and an u after. Therefore, the rules say you should put the hamza on a waw, and many people do it that way. However, other people just keep the qara'a looking the way it is. They keep the hamza on the aleph and write the u after it, and don't worry about the rules for this particular verb. Similarly, for you are reading, with an e, you get taqra'ina, written correctly with the hamza on the nebra, but you also get it written with the hamza on an aleph, taqra'ina, which preserves that basic shape of the verb. With the verb to begin, you get ibda'i, imperative, begin to a girl, ibda'i, with a hamza on the aleph, and they are beginning, yabda'una. You get the, again, variation between the hamza written on a waw and the hamza written on an aleph. Now, as I say at the bottom of this slide, these variations sometimes give students and others the impression that the hamza system is basically random, and you can more or less put the Hamza however you want. However, this just isn't true. Most of the randomness in the system is with these two verbs, and the rules for Hamza at the end of a word, like with astiqa, aren't really random at all. It varies, but it varies according to rules, and so you get very little actual random variation. Most of the variation writing Hamza is according to the rules. If you master this system, the way the Hamza is written is going to give you a lot of information. It will tell you what the surrounding vowels can be, and so it will differentiate between words. In certain cases, it will tell you what the grammar vowel is, and so you'll know whether it's the subject, object of a sentence, etc. And so it's worth it to master this system and to try to understand and get a feel for how the Hamza is written, because that will help you read better.